like a countdowners. Hey, we are live. I've got to say, it would really be helpful if StreamYard would have some sort of countdown to say you're live in like 3, 2, 1.
And
Boom.
apparently you've been live for 25 seconds, so everyone may have heard the I wish there was a countdown before you said I wish there was a countdown.
Oh, okay. Because it tells me I hit go live, and then there's a little spinny thing for a while, and then it just says you are live. So, hey, we're live, everybody. What's up, wrestling fans? I'm Doug.
And I'm Kevin, and apparently you're tuning in for the old-timey wrestling hour.
That's right. Kevin and I will be announcing matches on the radio every Sunday night.
It's our new side gig, but you're here, folks, for the regular gig.
Right?
This is where we talk wrestling.
We talk wrestling,
and we begin each week when I remember to cue it up with.
Oh, there we go. The opening bell. I didn't have to go ding ding ding, even though I enjoy going ding ding ding. But
you've already seen, now we've just had it. Now we're like got a disqualification or something going on where the ref just keeps hollering for the bell. But that's our sign that we're supposed to talk about some news, Doug.
Let's talk about some news. What's going on in the news, Kevin?
Well, I got a few things here. I've been kind of out of pocket the last few days, so Feel free to step in if I've missed anything important. But before I go too much further, I know last week during the news segment, I ended by thanking or congratulating Bree and Daniel Bryan for the birth of their child. And least we knew at the time that we were announcing it, because they hadn't made it public yet, but twins being twins, Bree's twin sister, Nikki, had their baby just 24 hours before. So congratulations also are due to Artem and Nikki as well.
Artem, that's his name. He sounds very elven, Artem.
Or very Russian, or Russian.
Maybe he's a Russian elf.
He could be. I don't know. I have not seen his stat sheet. His character sheet.
Yeah. And side note, now I did read something about D&D doing away with races, and now they're going to be called folk. But that's another wrestling stream for us.
Yes, that is. We can talk about it on what is it? ROH has a role playing channel. What is the show? You didn't know that?
I did not know that. I know that Wrestle Talk has a role playing channel where they do role playing wrestling thing. But I think
it's like regular. I think it's a regular show, perhaps on their regular YouTube channel. But I think it's like Role Play of Honor or something like that. Where essentially in these strange times we're in, when you're trying to find content, and ROH is one of those organizations not currently running shows, they get together via Zoom with some of their superstars and old school like D&D, I think.
Which I think is an excellent idea, and I do not understand why Brandon Cutler has not done that for AEW yet. I mean, he's pretty much a real life DM. I mean, he has a tag team called The Initiative. He comes out with a giant D20, but I think we're digressing from the news just a little bit, and I apologize for that.
We'll bring it back to AEW. You're talking AEW. How's this for a segue? AEW is going to have some preemptions over the next month and a half, due to the contract that TNT has with the NBA. There are at least 3 instances in the upcoming next month and a half that AEW is going to be airing on different days of the week. So your normal Wednesday night wars between NXT and AEW that folks are so eager to see who won, in the viewership, and who won in the demo and all that kind of stuff. This is one of those things that I'm sure AEW isn't happy about, but it was what they knew they were getting into with TNT, because TNT is a well-known broadcaster for the NBA, and much like Vince McMahon had to put up with back in the day with USA and their preemptions when they used to do things like the Westminster Dog Show.
Yes,
the dog show. So you will. I think there was one night that I can't remember if it was the first night or if it was the one of the other times that it was going to be preempted. But one week they're airing on a Thursday, and then like there's 2 other weeks that they're going to be doing like a Saturday show. So,
and they're really bad time slots on a Saturday. It's like Saturday at 2 p.m, or it's something like that. I don't have the info in front of me, but I thought those Saturday time slots were pretty bad.
Not even prime time. So
Right.
it will be interesting. We'll watch that to see what ratings do. Again, everyone's so ratings obsessed right now with how wrestling is doing, particularly on the head-to-head Wednesday nights. Obviously, NXT is going to get free passes on those 3 weeks, and it'll be curious to see if the audience. I know Dynamite Doug will follow, but how many folks are going to follow to an odd time on a Saturday? There could be a big ratings hit,
This
unfortunately, for AEW those weeks.
And speaking of AEW and ratings hits, something that's not going to hit them right now, but I'm understanding that the executive responsible for bringing AEW to TNA is now out of a job at TNA
I, I
or TNT.
I saw that today as I was returning back to town, and yeah, who knows? Hopefully, Tony Khan, who owns AEW, had made it sound as if they had a quite cozy relationship with the
Mm-hmm.
network. So hopefully, one person being changed out of that power structure doesn't affect things. But Doug, you and I are old enough fans to remember what happened when the powers that be at TNT and TBS, and at that time AOL Time Warner is what
Mm-hmm.
the corporation was. When WCW's biggest supporter got booted from that company in a restructuring, the writing was on the wall. WCW wasn't around much longer.
This is true, and it really doesn't look like very good foreshadowing when you have Eric Bischoff show up on TNT Wrestling for the first time in 22 years. So
Even though that was a fantastic segment,
it was a fantastic segment.
Yeah, that is definitely some news worth watching, though, because obviously the world of professional wrestling, all of professional wrestling, is better off by having mainstream competition for WWE.
Absolutely.
It pushes everybody. It's the most exciting wrestling has been in a while, despite all the problems with not having crowds. It would be a shame. And again, we're getting way, way ahead of ourselves, but it is definitely worth pointing to the fact that this has happened before and it didn't turn out so well. Let's hope for different this time.
Absolutely.
It is wrestling related, but Vince McMahon, as you know,
wrestling adjacent. That's cool.
Well, it's wrestling adjacent from a couple of different angles. So for those of you who maybe haven't been following the mainstream sports news, but Vince McMahon tried to reboot his failed football league that he had in the early part of the 2000s, the XFL, and it actually was doing fairly well. Ratings were strong in the cities, in several of the cities that had teams. The attendance was good. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. The season had to be shut down. Mm-hmm. And in the midst of all of that, with a new venture, they had to declare bankruptcy. They had to dissolve, the teams, the TV contracts, all of that business. Well, out of bankruptcy, Doug, last week, Vince McMahon's baby got picked up.
I can smell what you're cooking, Kevin.
That's exactly right, my friend. In a weird twist of fate, the Rock, his company that he has along with his ex-wife, which is an interesting story in and of itself. Indeed, that they're still business partner. But they bought the bankrupt XFL, and The Rock was a big-time college football player that had dreams of going pro, and is also one of the more driven mans in sports and entertainment. So I have no doubt in my mind that the millions and millions. What? I didn't do that intentionally. I didn't. But what was it, like 15? Oh, I can't.
15 million. Yeah.
15 million,
the XFL for 15 million. And I guess there was some resistance to that price, maybe because it was too low or whatever, but it passed whatever testing measures it needed to pass to get approved. And that holding company, I've forgotten what it's called, but it's Rock, Danny Garcia, and many others that are part of it, have now own the XFL.
And I would think that it has to be pennies on the dollar, because 15 million sounds like the amount you'd pay for a franchise, for a team, not for an entire league.
Right.
So, and obviously that is not, it's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money to the world's biggest movie star. So what he does with it, where he goes with it. And I'm curious, I've not heard anything, Doug, and maybe you have, in the last few days I have been out of touch a little bit, kind of unconnected, but how does Vince feel about this? I know he was in a foul mood in general over the XFL and having to give it up, but he has always had a good, you're always part of our team, our family, Rock. Come back for, whatever events we can get you back for. What does this do to that relationship?
This is what I'm wondering because I know you've been off the grid for a few days, and Raw Raw has been described as a hot mess. They were still rewriting while it was going on. Well, not on air because they taped this and this and next week. But if the production of any WWE products this week is any indication, the old man is very upset, just with the wackiness that was TV this week. But I don't know, and I'm sure he expected coming out of bankruptcy to get a better price than he actually did. But I don't know. I think it's interesting. I'm not really a sports guy as far as like what we call, I guess, legitimate sports, real sports. I prefer mine scripted with predetermined outcomes. But yeah, I am a big fan of the Rock show he had on HBO, Ballers, where he was a former NFL guy who turned sports agent, and I just kind of in my mind have that as what's going on with the XFL now. So it'll be fun to see where it happens. I don't know.
And the last bit of news I have, Doug, and I thought that this was probably even with the XFL news, I thought this might have been the most interesting news story that I saw this week. But for old school fans who remember the Midnight Rockers, Shawn Michaels had a partner. That partner was Marty Jannetty. One went on to be a huge single star. The other went on to be a punchline into what happens when you break up a tag team. Well, Marty Jannetty was back in the news this week, folks. If you didn't hear, he made a pretty audacious claim
yes, he did.
on his social media, noting that he had once made someone disappear when he was a teenager. And that post was later deleted, but obviously screenshots were, circulating online.
Yes.
It has resulted in Jannetty not only trending on Twitter, but trending to the point that he caught the attention of the Columbus, Georgia Police Department. And they are looking into the claim, looking into potentially identifying any missing persons who match the information that Marty Jannetty gave online. So again, to recap, Marty Jannetty, the punchline, the man who went through the barbershop window when Shawn Michaels was on his way to being a single star, at least claims or hints to the fact that as a teenager, he killed another kid and decided he was going to put that on online for all to see, including the investigators and local police. So stay tuned.
So I don't have any information in front of me, but I was watching some stuff earlier today, and they talked about this. Apparently, isn't the first time that Jannetty has made some very outlandish claims, and has a history with substance abuse, and maybe that's fueled this post. I certainly hope that this was fueled by something else, and it's not the case that Marty Jannetty may have actually killed a person back in the 70s. But it's a developing story, and we'll see where that goes.
We'll keep following that story wherever it leads. One way or the other, there's likely to be charges filed.
Yes.
And Doug, unless you have anything, that's the week that was as far as the news goes. I am ready when you are.
I am so ready for our main event.
Ladies and gentlemen, the main event.
Kevin, let's talk Tessa.
Let's do some talk of Tessa Blanchard. Folks, if you've not seen Tessa because you're a fan of either just mainstream WWE or AEW, Tessa's probably the biggest star in the business that you maybe have yet to see on widely available mainstream wrestling programming. Obviously, it's right there in the name. The pedigree is a link to the Hall of Famer, one of a kind, Four Horsemen, Tully Blanchard. But Doug, that's not the only claim to familial royalty that Tessa has, right?
Magnum TA, stepfather of Tessa Blanchard. The girl comes from quite a pedigree in two different directions.
And for those who don't remember Magnum, who weren't watching in the 80s, had it not been for a tragic car accident, and much like we talked about last week when our main topic was wrestling retirements, the medical retirement, at least back then, was permanent. And he was tabbed at the time to be the future world champion. Like
He-
he was going to be the guy, the face that battled the heel, which was Ric Flair, and they would have had back and forth through the '80s. You could have seen him interchange him in with those Dusty Rhodes and Ricky Steamboats and other men that were made in the '80s through their feuds and relationships with Ric Flair. So even though a lot of folks are going to remember Tully Blanchard because he is still on TV today, Magnum TA, especially during that era, was as big a name as they come. So it would go to figure, if you're wondering about this young lady who we're discussing in Tessa Blanchard, that if she's a wrestler and she has the name Blanchard and she's also the stepdaughter of Magnum TA, well, surely that's how she got in the business. But Doug, again,
Well, I guess along with that great pedigree comes great problems because Tessa's had her history of problems and issues, and Tessa was actually in the WWE briefly in the mid-teens, but that you know. I guess things took a different path for her, and she ended up in Impact. But I'm sure we'll get to that in a minute. But
I mean, she didn't even. What I was getting at is that it wasn't Tully or Magnum that started her down the path to pro wrestling. Like, I mean, you'd think that with that pedigree that, it runs in the family business, what have you. Doug, it was 6 months into her training before her family even knew that she wanted to be wrestling.
This is true. I watched an interview with Tessa on Chris Van Vliet's YouTube channel, and Tessa's a very polished interviewer. She's very focused. If you've never seen her before, her interviews will put you in the mind of a Charlotte Flair, but because again, she has that pedigree, but she's very focused and very driven, and it wasn't really a shoot interview, and she wasn't necessarily in character. I just think this is the way the girl is, where, once she finally found something that worked for her, she was into it. And according to this interview, where she's telling Chris Van Vliet, when people really realized who she was, they were like, yeah, we cannot train you. We are not doing this if your dad does not know, if your stepdad does not know. They have to know, and we have to get their blessing, or this training stops.
She started at the age of 18, but prior to that, she had really sort of cut off all communications with her immediate family. So controversy and some of the other things we're going to get to here in a little bit that she has had while in the business. Some of these problems obviously predate her time in the business, because there was a time in her young adulthood, we'll say, her teenage years there, when she was officially an adult, when she did not have communication with her family. She was working at a nightclub and then began training at the age of 18, again, during that time when her family on either side, the Magnum side or the Tully side, they didn't really know what she was doing.
Tully side just sounds funny. Is that when you decide to kill a Tully? Tully side. Sorry.
Please do not be making it. I promise the Huntington Area Police Department that Doug is not confessing to anything.
No Tully sides. No Tully sides. Just, or Magnum side. But anyway.
As you said, and I have seen in corroborating interviews, it was her trainers, after about 6 months of her at age 18 training to be a professional wrestler, to say, hey, listen, if we're going to keep going with this, you got to let Tully Blanchard and Magnum TA know that we're training you. And again, these are professional wrestling trainers, probably respected the hierarchy there, and the fact that they don't want people that are still powerful in the business as a Tully or a Magnum to come down on them for training their daughter without letting them know.
So really, because I mean, at the end of this piece of her story, it's really a happy ending that wrestling reunites her with her family on both sides. With her dad, her mom, her stepmom, her stepdad. It all brings them back together. I think even her siblings are like, "Wow, you're actually really good at this."
Was it not her like getting back in touch to say that I'm doing this what really started them talking?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really legitimately wrestling that brought this family back together, because I'm not sure about the details of what fractured the relationship she had with her parents, but
I've never seen her address that. I've heard her talk a lot about how they weren't talking at the time, but never the reasons why.
Exactly. I'm not sure that's ever been brought up in any interviews or any kind of media, but she is pretty open about talking about how this started those conversations with family members again. And so wrestling, healing old wounds there for whatever it calls them, but bringing families back together.
And again, this is at this point, she's still 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, again, with her relationship back with her family, I'm sure some strings were pulled there once the family got involved with her, her training and what it is that she wanted to do, and realizing just how darn good she was at it. She actually had a WWE tryout in those very, very early days. It was less than a year into her deciding she was going to be a pro wrestler that she had a tryout essentially with WWE. It didn't receive a formal offer, but then decided to go build her name for herself and went out on the independent scene. And today's independent scene, as you and I, Doug, have discussed on this show a lot, there's so many places that you can now make a name for yourself that you don't necessarily have to be on
True.
national television, which again, as we said at the start of the program, Tessa Blanchard may be the biggest name talent that a lot of you watching this maybe have never even seen, because Mexico, Japan, the independents, these are really where Tessa started to really stand out. The first time she really had a national TV audience, and again, this is niche, was 2016, just 4 years ago, on Lucha Underground. And I don't know how many people actually had access to, what was it, Doug? El Rey, I think is
El Rey, yes.
Yeah, I didn't at the time.
And I believe you can, I'm not sure if you still can or not, but there was a time when I caught up on Lucha Underground. I believe it was on Netflix. So I was able to actually catch up on the first couple of seasons of that.
I never got caught up on it. I started watching it, but yes, that all ended. So that's off of there as well. And if I recall, wasn't she a masked wrestler when she was with Lucha Underground?
Well, it's right there in the name, right? Lucha Underground.
Well, not everyone wore masks.
Right, I know.
But I'm pretty sure that she might have not been using. I don't know that she was using the
Blanchard name.
Yeah, I don't remember that. But that still 2016 was a big year for her, because not only did she get up on Lucha Underground, it's the same year she began wrestling both women and men. And that is something that she would start to be known for, and kind of in many ways was at the foreground of the intergender movement that we see a lot more frequently now than we would have 4 years ago.
So here's something interesting about that, because in that same Chris Van Vliet interview that Tessa's talking about, basically her life in professional wrestling up to this point, she's also talking about her intergender matches and wrestling the guys. And Tessa strikes me as one of those girls who's just really a tomboy and has always just been one of the guys, kind of, because she talks about how there was a limited number of females training where she trained to wrestle. So she kind of just dove in and was wrestling with the guys, and it really wasn't a big deal to her. It was just what you did, or at least what she was doing. So I can see the natural evolution of that led to her basically to this point career defining moment.
And if you were wanting to have, a name on your independent card, and you maybe didn't have other female wrestlers to wrestle a Tessa Blanchard, you could get a name like Tessa Blanchard and put her in there with your top male performer, and because she was so comfortable with it. And in some ways it attracted attention, because it had really been since the days of China, since we saw very common male versus female matches. And in many ways what Tessa was doing was different than China, because she was billed almost as part man, part woman, just like this big beast. And here you have Tessa, who is more just a smaller athlete, and was holding her own with these men. Obviously, that's not what she was intended to do, if she made it to WWE, which was still at one point her goal. That same year, 2016, she once again got on WWE's radar, because that's when she had a couple of NXT matches as enhancement talent, which is basically the person paid to lose to the stars. And 2016, again, banner year for her as far as starting to get exposure. She also appeared on the All In pay-per-view. So that year she was working NXT, AEW, Lucha Underground. Even though she wasn't under contract in none of those, she was definitely building a reputation.
She's also in the Mae Young Classic in 2017 with WWE's the Mae Young Classic. So she had her moments in WWE. but never really took off there
She
for.
thought that that could lead to a contract because it did this for so many other female performers. In fact, in that first round, the Mae Young Classic, she lost to
Kyrie
Carter
Sane.
Saint, yeah,
Yeah.
who eventually, who in the second Mae Young Classic would win, get a contract, all that sort of business. So she actually thought that maybe she was WWE bound, and when that exposure didn't lead her to actually signing with WWE, she went to Japan. And then, Doug, probably the way that most fans, if you know Tessa Blanchard, probably the way that most people know her, and it really to date has been her her sort of not only biggest exposure but her biggest success. She spent the last year pretty much on Access TV as part of both WoW and the Women
Yes,
of Wrestling, and even more so Impact Wrestling.
that's
And
right.
she not only made her name in Impact Wrestling, she became the first female to hold a world championship that had traditionally been only available to male athletes. So they not only did Impact push her to the top of the female card, they pushed her to the top of the card in general. And in a very memorable feud with Sami Callihan that lasted almost the good part of the last year, she
Yes.
eventually came out on top and was the first person in a major wrestling promotion in the world to the female to take that male title. And you'd think that that would be just a fairy tale ending of a story, Doug, but unfortunately her impact tenure had another side.
You broke up a little bit there, brother, but yeah, it did take. It's went another way with this at Tessa, because Tessa was summarily fired from Impact Wrestling just a few months ago during this pandemic that we're all dealing with right now. I guess Tessa's been living in Mexico with her fiance, and instead of being able to actually come in, cut promos or that type of thing, she was not doing that. And Slammiversary was coming up with Tessa. Was it this Fatal Five Way? Were there four male contenders in Tessa that were scheduled at Slammiversary?
Yeah, she still had the belt at this point in time. She was still world champion when she was fired.
So once again, making history as the first world champion to be stripped of the title and fired by Impact. But that's exactly what happened to her. They stripped her of the title and fired her because, from all accounts, she refused to video promos and send them in, and also was asking for 150 grand to actually drop that title at Impact, because her Impact Slammiversary, the TNT TNA. Let me get another drink. Hold on.
Got it. The Impact. Go Impact.
The Impact.
They're not TNA anymore.
The Impact version of WrestleMania Slammiversary. She would have been out of contract prior to that airing, but I guess they had that.
Her, she was going to be. She was being expected to have this match after her contract end. But then, in fairness to the promotion, not only were they dealing with the pandemic where they didn't have the opportunity to have her do all the things they had wanted her to do up to that point, and she didn't give them the benefit of the doubt, they kind of minted her as a star. They invested a lot in her. She was the centerpiece of their promotion. When you have the champion, that's your face. And the fact that they were doing this for a female athlete in the traditional male division just goes to show how committed they were to making her the main hero in their story. And so it wasn't, though, as if Impact didn't have some signs that there could be trouble. In fact, one of the reasons that WWE supposedly back in the day didn't sign her was the constant rumors of backstage problems. Not really specifically noted what these were, but just some behavioral issues or some things that they didn't like, is why she actually had not caught on to a main promotion up to that time. So Impact signed her knowing that her reputation was spotty. But then after a year and them building her up the way they did, everything seemed to, you didn't hear a whole lot. However, some very troubling allegations came up in January, and after those allegations, they still chose to put the belt on her. So some of that has to be on Impact. But Doug, those allegations, that's part of what we're really wanting to focus on when we talk about the downside of Tessa Blanchard.
We have allegations of bullying and racism, which both deserve zero tolerance policies throughout this industry at this point. But we have allegations of both of these. If proven true, I believe they should be zero tolerance allegations or zero tolerance. But you need to investigate those allegations. I guess in TNA's eyes, Impact's eyes, that they weren't substantial enough to act upon. I don't know.
Or let's be honest, if you're not one of the majors, Impact might have thought that, yeah, despite all that, we'll take a chance because it's a name and it'll get us in the press.
Right.
I mean, Dave Meltzer supposedly said that the only reason that she was in Impact to begin with is because she was easy for them to sign because the other promotions were staying away from her. So they probably saw a good chance to come in and get her while her value was low and hope for the best. It didn't quite work out that way for them.
It really didn't. And again, going back to that Van Vliet interview, if you haven't seen it, I encourage you guys to go out and Google Tessa Blanchard, Chris Van Vliet interview. It's a really great interview because you can see what a polished champion, at least on camera, that she is, because she is very polished, very focused, very, I don't want to say coached, but maybe coached is the correct word here. Maybe coached and driven, because it's a very clear, concise interview. Maybe Van Vliet's giving her a lot of soft pitches, but she comes across as what I would consider WWE championship material in that interview.
And one thing that we maybe been remiss about, because we're talking a lot about her pedigree, her lineage, her background, all this stuff is important to her story, but we probably haven't mentioned the fact that in the ring, she's phenomenal.
She is. Again, she is a Charlotte Flair. She is, a Sasha Banks. She belongs with women of that caliber. There are TNA stars like that too. I'm sorry, Impact stars. It's going to take me a while. I don't get to watch it that much.
And she's only 25, and she started, training, as we said, at 18. So she's only 7 years into this and still really young and already that good. And Charlotte Flair is probably the best, analogy that we could make. So I'm glad you made it, because it's the name that might get people's attention, but then you see her in the ring and you realize it's not the name. It's something in the DNA that has to be passed down, because you don't get that good, that young, just like Charlotte, who was very late in life to professional wrestling, doesn't get that good that quick without it just being, as they say, a natural. And Tessa is a natural.
She absolutely is. And that brings me back around again. Charlotte Flair wasn't the one who wanted to go into wrestling all of her life. Same thing with Tessa Blanchard, something they both fell into later in life. Tessa a lot younger than Charlotte, because I believe Charlotte, a little Ashley Flair, was a personal trainer in Charlotte prior to becoming a wrestler. But Tessa came to it a little bit younger, but still it wasn't always high on their list of priorities. But coming from that pedigree, it's like you said, it's in the blood, and it definitely shows in those two girls. Tessa could easily be slotted in to any position in the Four Horsewomen of WWE that there is, because she is just that good.
And the upside is it's tremendous, but the downside that we've referenced is worrisome, because yes, the early days when WWE didn't end up signing her and all that, it was over these very vague attitude issues, but probably worth explaining out even more, because we alluded to it. This whole bullying and racism allegation wasn't just that whole, well, she has attitude issues, whatever. It was specific. It was an alleged incident, one of the alleged incidents that was both bullying and racism, if true, involved Blanchard supposedly spitting in the face of a black athlete, calling her a racial slur. The woman in question is a performer that goes by the ring name Black Rose, and it was someone else who actually reported on that as being something they had witnessed backstage, and then Black Rose came out, confirmed it, as did a few others. So there's multiple people who are saying this story actually occurred, which is kind of where we find Tessa now, Doug. This sort of no man's land of the hottest property in, the hottest unsigned talent in all of wrestling, as well as a lightning rod for controversy. Exactly. Who's going to take that chance of signing her? So obviously a lot of folks might think with with her father working for AEW, that they might have a leg up, that there might be an in for her there. But I think that, here recently we've seen AEW take a very hard line against
Absolutely.
racism. The racist comments that are verified, that we all know about with Hulk Hogan, and as well as his wife, has led AEW to publicly say, you guys will never be welcome here.
Never. Exactly.
It's
And
hard to say that and then go sign Tessa.
right, even with totally working in the organization, there's not been a lot of buzz. I think the AEW women's division could definitely benefit from Tessa, but I'm not
No
sure
doubt.
the benefits she could bring to the table are worth the trouble that comes along with her, or at least the allegations of all this trouble. I'm not sure if anything's actually been proven. It seems to be a lot of she said, down to her relationship with Ricochet, because she and Ricochet were once a couple. I believe during her time in the WWE, but that led to a lot of problems at the Performance Center with allegations of infidelity on both sides, and just
Just a
again,
lot of
it just
lot of
a lot of drama seems to follow this girl, or at least reports of drama, and that's enough to make some people back away. But I think between Tony Khan and Vince McMahon smells the money and the potential that could be made there, while Tony Khan is looking at the bigger picture and the optics of it, and I would love to see her. I mean, I go by the handle Dynamite Doug on the show. I would love to see her in AEW, but I don't know that that's where she's going to end up. I don't think that's where she's going to end up. I think the tolerance level that Tony Khan has versus Vince McMahon, Vince McMahon's going to pick her up before Tony Khan does.
But picking her up before Tony Khan doesn't mean that it's really going to happen anytime soon. You talk about reports, and obviously wrestling journalism is a misnomer to some folks, and that they dismissively refer to the dirt sheets as just rumor spreading. So we don't want to add fuel to that fire.
Right.
But one day you hear, oh, AEW is really interested, or Vince McMahon has got feelers out, and then the next day you hear from also supposed legitimate sources that neither of those promotions are willing to take a chance or touch her with a 10-foot pole. So what is the true story? What is her market out there? She's currently under contract to no one. There's WWE, there's AEW, there's other options. There's the independents, but of course we don't have an independent scene right now.
Right. We have New Japan. We have AAA. We have, there are options
Ring of
for
Honor.
Ring RH, absolutely.
So, Doug, where do you think is going to be her most likely landing spot, in your opinion? If you had to say today, where is Tessa Blanchard going to end up? Where do you see her fitting in?
WWE. I still think that
To the NXT brand or to one of the main rosters?
That's an interesting question, because I think once Charlotte is over her issues that are keeping her off TV right now, I think that would be an amazing feud.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, by the time Charlotte gets back, maybe, just maybe, we're in front of a live audience again, because I don't expect to see Charlotte Flair back until 2021. I mean, I hope I'm wrong about that, but I think keep Charlotte off TV. You go ahead, you sign Tessa to a WWE contract. You test her out. Don't put her on TV, but you keep her in Orlando. You start letting her work with the NXT bunch. Again, you keep her off TV. You start coaching her now. You start rehabbing that that reputation that exists right now. And I think AEW is not going to do that, but WWE could do that. So if I had to say today where Tessa's ending up, as much as I'd love to see her in AEW, because I think that women's division could use it, I see her at WWE. What are your thoughts?
She would definitely be more of a centerpiece, I believe, in AEW, that you could shoot her more to the top. I honestly think she'd have more women, obviously, to work with and built-in storylines. I mean, the Charlotte one is something that AEW couldn't offer as far as a storyline. Right. Who doesn't want to see Flair versus
Blanchard? Absolutely.
It writes itself, but it's such an interesting time. And you mentioned the crowds and the lack of crowds. I do think that if there were crowds and you were actually more competitively, signing, vying for Tessa's affection, I think that she would be a hot free agent in a time where you didn't have the Black Lives Matter movement where it makes her
Mhm.
a little more untouchable than she would have been a couple of years ago with similar allegations. And then you don't have a crowds to really see how the fans would react to you if you actually signed her. So I think that the rush of making sure you sign her before the competition does isn't there right now, because I don't think AEW will sign her. And WWE, they honestly may be playing a game of chicken to see who flinches first. I think personally, I think that Japan or Mexico is probably her landing spot. I think for all the attention of what big show she's going to land on for American audiences, she's shown that she can be a star and without the American audience. And
True.
I think that if anything, she's had several chances in the past, and WWE
Indeed.
has taken a pass. And AEW has that sort of line in the sand. So I think both would probably be more likely down the road if she can prove herself as having changed. If she can go have a year away in this time again when there's really no audience to court anyway, go to Japan where they're playing in front of audiences, see how the fans react, see how she goes over, hear the talk out of the locker room as far as how she's behaving. You could do the same in Mexico just without the audience right now. But go back out and rebuild your name like you did the first time. If you can go and show at 25, still a young person with quite the pedigree, quite the name, and quite the talent, you keep your nose clean for a year. It wouldn't surprise me for either AEW or WWE to suddenly be interested and then be able to justify their interest by saying she's changed. And we know she's changed because look what she's gone and done. So I think it's a return to Mexico or Japan. Obviously we're all just speculating here as to what her market actually is or where she'll end
Right.
up. I think she's got to go prove herself somewhere first, and whether that's the way that you described it, which I hadn't thought of, that you kind of keep her off camera and you make her do her penance rather publicly in the press about sensitivity training and all whatever else they want to do to make sure that she's changed, make her show that she wants it. That's an interesting thought. I hadn't come to my mind, but I think that a very similar thing is what I was thinking, and that she could just do that on someone else's dime and then see if the majors would come knocking for her. Then when you're only 25, you can go journeyman for a couple more years and then hope that at 28, still very young 27, 28, that WWE or AEW would be very interested in her. But
It's
we'll
It's a very good point because I think in wrestling terms I tend to turn to think very binary. It's either AEW or WWE. While I recognize that there is a bigger force out there, there's multiple organizations she could go to. I do tend to really think very binary when it comes. It's either AEW or WWE, especially the North American audience. But there are other options that she could go for. I mean, she does live in Mexico, so
and
it
they
has
would have
been
her
there.
back. Yeah, they'd have her back in a heartbeat. And she's been champion there in AAA and CMS. I mean,
Mhm.
they would be happy to have her. And yes, we think binary. I mean, I do too, even though I watch a lot of promotions, as I know
Right.
you do as
Yeah.
well. When we think big time, AEW and then WWE for a lot, or that is the big time. Tessa has already done everything else, so that really
Mhm.
is the final frontier for her. But just because she's done it doesn't mean that with the baggage she carries, it doesn't mean that she might not have to do it again. This is something I put in my notes, Doug, and I'll just throw this out there as really the final thing I have to say on it. When I talk landing spots, we talk Ring of Honor, we talk WWE, AEW, or one of the foreign countries. But even though it doesn't seem likely because of how badly it ended, we've seen some strange things in professional wrestling. You give it
Yeah,
6, 7 months, it's
that's
where she
true.
made her biggest name. It's where she's had her greatest success. Once they pick up and start playing in front of audiences again, and they try to get eyes on the Access product, and they have actually been putting on a pretty
Mhm.
strong product. A return to the company of Tessa Blanchard, no harm, no foul.
Right.
It's not out of the realm of possibility.
I had not, wow. I had not thought about that, but
I don't know if we left him speechless, folks, or
that's something again because I think very binary when we are talking about wrestling, even because I mean I just completely discount New Japan and Stardom because I don't see her as a fit for Stardom. Maybe AAA, maybe MLW, something maybe like a CMML. But I always,
Mexico does a lot of intergender.
yeah, you're right. I do tend to think very binary though, and I think especially if by the end of the year, which I'm hearing that we're not going to get our women's evolution pay-per-view this year, but that would be a excellent place for Tessa to show up this year if she were going to debut in the WWE. You go ahead and you bring her in, you start rehabbing that character now, you start rehabbing her now, you put money into turning things around about that reputation that she does have, and then you have her make a monstrous debut at an event like Evolution. If they do something like that this year, which again, everything I'm reading is pointing to a big no about that, but who knows where she's going to end up? I just don't see it being my AEW.
And I just don't see it being WWE, at least not right now.
Right.
I can't imagine a world where at some point Tessa Blanchard isn't on our national American TV screens every week in something other than Impact, which has a devoted following but doesn't have the same widespread cachet as an NXT, WWE, AEW. I think she'll get there one day. She may have to sell herself low again, and then just bet on herself that she's going to make that name and reputation. But she is an interesting contradiction. All the talent, all the pedigree, intriguing backstory. Not sure what that market is and who will take her and where she'll end up for the time being. But we'll follow that here on the Two Bros Wrestling Show. That's what we do.
That's what we do. And in another time, in another era, she would have been, another Shawn Michaels, all the talent. Michaels doesn't have the pedigree of like a Blanchard or a Flair, but Shawn has the talent, but also came with a lot of baggage and a lot of trouble. Some of the greats apparently do, but only time will tell. You're absolutely right.
And when she signs somewhere, folks, we'll make sure you know it here, because this is not the last that these two bros are going to be talking Tessa Blanchard. I guarantee you she's still got splashes to make in this industry, and we're going to follow her here. And for the sake of all of us who will enjoy watching what she has to offer, hopefully she pulls it together and turns it around before it's too late. I'd hate to see a promising career not become what it should be.
Absolutely. And with that, Kevin, I think it's time to hit the big finish. What do you think?
Let's go to the big finish, Doug.
Big finish. Big finish this week.
Big finish is where we go when we talk about some of the happenings in wrestling this week, what we liked, what we didn't. We typically start out with what we didn't so we can end on a positive note. Doug, we may be in line here with the same thing. I wouldn't be surprised if we were. But my embarrassment of the week, and folks, if you have one or agree or disagree strongly with what I'm about to say, you let me know, and I will publicly call you a liar on here.
I will fight you on this one.
I will fight you, exactly. I will take you to Raw Underground.
Yes, indeed. What the hell was that, Kevin?
Doug, I like my realism in professional wrestling. I like it when you weave MMA into my pro wrestling, a la like the recent Riddle Thatcher match, or
yes,
any Riddle match. I mean, you can do that to make it seem real. What you can't do is script MMA fights and put it on your wrestling show without your wrestling looking bad.
So here's the thing, man. Raw Underground seems like an amazing idea. It's a really great concept that could be really great. And like you just said, Riddle Thatcher, there is the blueprint for Raw Underground. You don't need the ring, but you need that kind of talent. You need that kind of action, not the crap we got. You want to do Underground? AEW did Raw Underground so much better in those vignettes in like the backwoods swamp areas with the murder hawk, and all that in like this backyard wrestling than WWE did. I don't know what the hell. I don't know. And the girls dancing, we don't need that. It's 2020. Come on.
That definitely was a throwback that looked like more Attitude Era. And I know you're trying to go cutting edge, I guess, the whole Underground name. I was willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. I really was. And for folks, if you don't know what we're talking about and didn't see Raw, maybe we should explain.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, ratings have been hurting, and so they're hurting for ideas. And there's sort of a joke in the wrestling business that when ratings start to get really bad, Vince McMahon puts himself or a member of his family on television. And like clockwork, this week Shane McMahon showed up with Raw
TikTok.
Underground.
Yeah.
And the concept is that during that final hour of Raw, you're going to have Raw Underground, which is sort of a promotion within the promotion. It seems what they're going for, and it looks like shoot fighting that they're doing in a darkened room.
Oh, I don't mean to interrupt your brother, but it's supposed to look like shoot fighting. It's supposed to look like shoot fighting, but it
when
looks
I first
like
heard, man, I thought that they were doing like Brawl for All again, which was
yes,
a bad idea because
yes.
that was real fighting. And I thought, are they doing to do like MMA on wrestling? Because when they did the Brawl for All back in the 90s, what they did was they took wrestlers and they put them in the ring with each other and had them box. And it was real. They weren't scripting it. It was real fighting. But the problem with that is that it's hard to, in the context of a pro wrestling show, present real fighting and then go back to, after explaining it to folks, now, folks, this is real what you're about to see. And then you go back to, and now here's our little scripted stuff. It was a mess. People got really hurt, legitimately hurt.
Legit hurt.
No one got over. And
the people
yeah,
the people they wanted to get over, like in their Brawl for All back in the day, didn't get over and got put down really quick. And then stars they had no idea and no idea what to do with and no intentions of ever even pushing, actually were suddenly finding themselves at the top of this heap because they could actually fight, like legit fight, like shoot fight.
And if you won this whole tournament, you got to go to WrestleMania and have a legit fight with a legit boxer,
which was a disaster.
Yes, I don't have to tell you how that's going to turn out. So now all you've done is take all your wrestlers and had them, get beat up. People got legitimately injured, and in the end, your guy who won the tournament lost immediately, like knocked cold to an actual professional boxer. So you made all of wrestling look bad. I thought, oh no, they're doing that again by having real fighting. What are they thinking? Didn't they learn? Doug, I don't know that this isn't worse. Because at least if it was real fighting, you could say the outcome is like, yeah, it's not good. No one's going to get over. I don't want this on my wrestling show. But when I watch professional wrestling, I love it in all of its different flavors. I like hard,
absolutely.
I like technical. I like strong style. I like MMA style mixed into my professional wrestling. But if I'm watching professional wrestling, Doug, and I think you want to see professional wrestling, not MMA fights. If I wanted to watch MMA fights, I'll watch Bellator. I'll watch
UFC. Exactly.
And this isn't even real, which at the very least, what you could say for Brawl for All was the idea was sound in that, okay, let's see who the toughest guy legitimately is, even though it's a dumb idea in the context of your fake show. When you have to point out that your show is fake, it doesn't do anyone any justice. But trying to compete with MMA or incorporate MMA by having scripted MMA matches, I think that's actually worse because it looks horrible in execution.
It's, again, I like the idea. They have the blueprint there with using matches. I mean, they need to go back and watch some NXT and watch that Riddle Thatcher match. I mean, I don't think Kurt Angle is the guy to be overseeing this because that's just awkward and weird to have Kurt Angle there. But at least Angle in that Thatcher and Riddle match, it worked. There's a blueprint there, but they're just like, and the way ratings are going right now, I'm wondering if we ever even see a Raw Underground again, because it seems like they throw things at the wall. If they get it ratings pop, it might go for another week or two, but if it doesn't, it's forgotten about, never mentioned again.
I think it'll go for another week or two. I hope that that's all it goes because it's a horrible idea. Terrible. I actually didn't mind the look. I'm like, okay, it's a different look. It looks kind of cool. Like the setup, like, oh, this is kind of neat. And maybe a different roster because there were some guys there at first. I'm like, who are these guys? And then they started doing what they were doing, and it was awful. I'm
Terrible.
all for taking part of Raw because it's too long at 3 hours and
Hmm.
presenting something different in the context of a pro wrestling show. I used to love back in the day when Nitro WCW they would like physically get up and change announcers. Like the first hour was
Hmm.
called by a different announcing. It's like it
Yes.
was a couple of shows in one. Take a different roster, take a subset, present an underground. Like at first, I thought it was going to be like hardcore or something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm fine for that. If it looks different, feels different, but it still needs to be pro wrestling. What this was hot garbage. By far my embarrassment of the week. I was going to ask you what yours was, but I think you ranted right along with
Yeah.
me.
Absolutely.
How could you be
Absolutely.
a wrestling fan and watch this week and that not be the most embarrassing thing you saw?
So let me pull us out of this dumpster fire that was Raw Underground and talk about my match of the week. And really, I'm just going to roll my performers of the week into this too,
Sure.
because Dakota Kai and Rhea Ripley really tore it up and were the highlights. And you're laughing, so I
Yeah.
mean, they were the high spot of wrestling for me this entire week, and I did not even get to watch NXT until earlier today. Sometimes like life gets in the way of this wrestling fans' wrestling enjoyment, but I finally got to catch up on all my wrestling this weekend. And I want to say maybe 4 hours ago, I actually got to watch NXT this week and get in both Raw and SmackDown. I mean, and of course my Dynamite. There's other shows I'd love to be able to catch during the week. I can't catch them all during the week though, but for me, from what I saw, Rhea Ripley, Dakota Kai, man, those girls put on a great show, an entertaining match, an awesome match, so many near falls, so much hard. Let me emphasize this once again if I haven't already, so much hard hitting offense from both of these girls. There are many times I'm cringing going, to the point where my 5-year-old son's going, Daddy, are those girls okay? Daddy, are you okay? Did she get
Well,
hurt?
the answer to that last question is no, no, son. Your daddy is not. But this time he's spot on. I know it says Dynamite Doug there under his name, and I was half tempted myself. I should be NXT Kevin because I realized that I'm almost ashamedly like not. It seems like a lot here lately. I've given NXT my match of the week. I really loved the John Moxley Darby Allin match from AEW this week. Even though, as you know, I'm not a Darby Allin guy. However, when I then saw NXT and saw what
Right.
those ladies did, we are on the same page. That was the match of the week. They tore it up, folks. If you don't watch anything but the main brands and or AEW, find NXT from this past week. If nothing else, the whole show was good as it normally is, but that match is one not just that was the best one of this week. It's the best I've seen in a while on especially
Absolutely.
non-pay-per-view television. Incredible performance. Doug, you're going to roll your performer of the weekend. I think we're going to have differences here, so you go ahead and keep on that stream with
I
your
mean, let's just go back and talk about that very first electric chair drop onto the ring apron. I thought Rhea Ripley legit killed Dakota Kai with that, and my goodness! And then there were just hit after hit. I don't think I've seen such a match that looks so hard. Well, maybe since that Riddle Thatcher match, which was just a few weeks ago. But I mean, these girls were beating the crap out of each other, or at least skillfully making it look like they were legitimately hurting each other.
And I think that is important and ties into what we were just talking about with the embarrassment of the week. There's a way that you can get wrestling over by making it look as real as you possibly can while not taking people out of the fact that I'm tuning into professional wrestling and I'm watching great professional wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
This was a perfect example
Really,
of
I
what
mean,
can be done in a shoot style like look without going to the ridiculous extreme that we were complaining
and
about
that
earlier.
and that just nails it right there. It's a shoot style look because this was, I want to say, this was old school wrestling for me, where I legitimately thought people were getting hurt. I thought not that there were botches, but my God, how does Dakota Kai coming out of this without blood just oozing from her nose and face? And I'm like, because these are professionals. These girls are both excellent at what they do, and they are entertaining the frack out of me right now.
Well, I mean, I obviously thought the same with you as far as the match of the week. I performer of the week. I went a little different. In fact, I'll carry the water for you here. So AEW. I want to talk AEW for a second, if that's okay with you, Doug.
It's all right, man. It's all right. Tony Khan says either one of us can talk about it as long as we continue to talk about it and
Good.
put them over. So
I am giving my performer of the week to AEW in general for AEW Dark, the show. If you haven't seen, again, folks, all of our content, every show we do on Sunday is archived on our YouTube and Facebook. But earlier this summer, we did a show talking about the anniversary of AEW, what we thought they were doing well, what we thought they still needed to improve on, what we just plain old didn't like. At the time, I noted that one of my biggest displeasures with AEW was that they have 2 hours. And if you take away the 2 hours on national television, cut out commercials and recaps, you're really talking you got an hour and 30 minutes to get talent over every week. Well, obviously in this modern age, with everyone running shows on YouTube and like there's another opportunity there. AEW had a whole other program that they do on their YouTube channel called AEW Dark. It was a wasted opportunity. And that's what I was complaining about before, because, the way they should be using that YouTube show that I said on our anniversary special on AEW, that you could get over, talent that you don't have time to fit into your 90-minute national televised program. You could reinforce personalities. You can advance storylines. You could introduce new folks in front of an audience before you put them on the big show. There's so much they can do, and they weren't. In fact, what Dark became was, 20, 30 minutes of decently competitive matches to all squash matches. And again, I like squash matches in moderation, but I almost had my embarrassment of the week last show as AEW Dark, because last week's episode was the largest one they ever had. It had got bloated up to 2 whole hours, and the entire 2 hours was all squash matches. So essentially wasted, not opportunity, but just a wasted program in general, a waste of time to sit through 2 hours of it. This week, they got it right. Yes, there were still some, squash matches, but they were strategically placed and served a purpose. They trimmed it down to a 1 hour contest. And then they had a very competitive match between Jack Evans and QT Marshall. The main event was a very good encounter between Butcher and Blade and Private Party. So they had a Scorpio Sky promo that was really, really good. And then the very next night, we see him advance his way into the TNT title picture. So I realized, oh man, that's even more cool, because they took the story that they started building on Dark and carried it over to the main show. That's exactly how I wanted them to be using that show from the get-go. And to top it all off, they have a separate YouTube show now that they started that is to crown. It's a tournament that they're airing on Mondays to crown the new women's tag team champions that they are introducing. And so those were competitive matches and was compelling content on their social channels. Yes. I'm all about compelling content on social channels, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
By the way, subscribe, follow,
like, share with all your friends, all your wrestling friends. Thanks.
So hopefully it wasn't a 1 week aberration. Hopefully this is the direction. Hopefully they watch our show, Doug, and realize that, those guys are onto something. We could be doing more, but kudos and performer of the week to AEW for utilizing their YouTube channels to build their talent and further their storylines. Keep up the good work. And I will watch more AEW than just your Wednesday night show.
I will never argue with you putting AEW over, brother. Never going to do that.
So. Doug, next week we got another action-packed show with a lot to talk about. It's been a while since we've got to do one of these together, but we're going to be previewing 2 pay-per-views in one night.
That gets exhausting for me, especially. I mean, we're looking at what, Takeover 30? Are we actually to Takeover 30?
Takeover 30 is 2 Saturdays from now, and then SummerSlam, which is the biggest show on WWE's calendar other than WrestleMania, is the following night. So you join us next week at 8 o'clock here on the Two Bros Wrestling Show, and we will get you up to speed on what is happening. We'll give you our predictions. Hopefully you chime in and let us know yours.
Absolutely. So until next time, folks, I've been Doug.
I've been Kevin.
And we're going to stop talking wrestling tonight. Good night, everybody.